Our episode begins with a happy couple moved into Delen's quarters now, who gets woken up with an urgent call from Minbar. The most urgent of topics, HR matters. He anxiously wants her to know that whatever she needs as far as assistance goes, they are ready to fill it. She's like, what the hell? So he explains, well, Lanier is leaving permanently, so naturally you're going to need an assistant or several assistants. We got a lot of options for you. A lot of different shaped head horns, too, if you like. While she copes with that, Londo's off making friends.
You have that vacant look in your eyes that says, hold my head to your ear, you'll hear the sea.
Londo's mad because his Bacardi or whatever has a very delicate flavor, one that's going to be ruined if it gets impounded. But Zach says even with all this sweet talking, the rules right now are for all foods to be impounded for 3 days on account of an infestation of the station. On the one hand, I get it. You can't afford to show favoritism and say that some people have to comply and others don't. On the other hand, though, if anything can survive sealed inside of a bottle of liquor, a 3-day waiting period isn't going to solve it. Well, while Veer takes Zach aside to be diplomatic, Londo, taking advantage of their backs being turned, sips a little of his booze, only to drop the bottle and collapse. I'm betting this isn't the first time that last part happened to him. After the titles, Dr. Franklin's all over this, while Zach's people start doing an analysis on the spilled contents to figure out what kind of poison was in the bottle. Meanwhile, Lanier begins the regular daily briefing, while all that Delen can do is wonder why he didn't say anything. He finally admits that with her and Sheridan being married, he feels he's just in the way. It's time for him to move on. To join the Rangers, in fact. Fill the gap left by Marks' death, both among the Rangers and inside of himself. Perhaps, also, he'd earn her respect. And plus, it would help him resist the urge to send Sheridan into the cornfield. 13 years of doing Babylon 5 reviews, and I've finally given in and done one of those. Meanwhile, Garibaldi goes to Veer to say that Londo's in really bad shape.
What is wrong with you people? Don't you have anything else better to do? Veer. Why don't you get a hobby, read a book or something?
And so is Veer, I guess. He's outraged someone would try to kill Londo, but Garibaldi knows who did. Londo's own heart. He wasn't poisoned, he had a heart attack. Richard Biggs, who plays Dr. Franklin, complained about Londo suddenly having a heart attack when there'd been no prior sign of it in the show, and his character not knowing about it. That there should have been warning signs. JMS insisted that wasn't necessarily the case and kept it in. They debated making it actual poison, but he decided in the end to go with a heart attack. Ironically, 6 years later, Biggs himself suffered exactly that kind of heart attack and passed away at only 44 years old. Well, Dr. Franklin explains that Centauri have two hearts, and in this case, it's the right heart which purifies the blood and gives it a little extra oomph that suffered the attack. Well, actually, it's Londo's left heart. It's just when you're looking at this picture, it's the heart that's on the right. Sorry about that. That one is too complicated to just do surgery on. It'd be better to replace the whole thing. Except it's going to take 3 days to get here, and Londo has at most 1 if he's stuck on life support. The best chance is that Londo's system itself can recover, which the next critical hours will then decide. You know how it is. Those hours show whether or not the patient is recovering. If they're able to get past that period, then recovery is very likely. They've survived the worst of it. Sheridan shares that with Delenn, although then follows it up with what really doesn't need to be said.
Stephen's done all he can. If Londo makes it through the night, he has a chance.
If he doesn't make it, that means he's dead, and his chances of recovery at that point aren't good at all. Sheridan shares more wisdom when the subject of Lanier's leaving comes up.
Well, as we say back on Earth, 3 is a crowd.
Wow, no wonder he went to Jakarta to write everything last time. If he continues this slide, he's going to wind up talking about the time he went to Africa and saw a gazelle. As they head off for bed, Delenn wishes Londo good luck, which is incorporated into the dream he's having, and he starts looking for her. He finds her playing the role of a veiled tarot card reader, except the cards show his past instead of his future. Fruit punch flavor. Londo admits that, he knows he's dying, and seems to be indifferent about that. Dude rails over import regulations, but when it comes to literal life and death, he's red shirt meme guy. Finally, he says that despite the temptation of defeating the fate that he had witnessed in his dreams for years of him and G'Kar strangling one another, he does still want to live. But she says he needs a word that she won't tell him. But okay, 2 syllables, first syllable sounds like what she does show him is his overstressed heart, and G'Kar standing in the shadows watching. In the real world, Lennier and Veer sit at the bar, unable to sleep because of their respective problems, and about the Shirley Temple that Veer is drinking. Early the next morning is when Lennier ships out, and in the end, Veer gives him a huge hug goodbye, although that could be the drink talking. After Veer leaves and heads to the lift, the camera tilts, the Dutch angle indicating we're now back in the dream world. Londo heads to that very bar, but all the bottles are empty. Damn, I've been sent to hell for my sins. Sheridan joins them to discuss being dead. Sheridan has experience in that area, after all. As they talk, Sheridan's clothes keep changing to reflect the changes that he underwent while on the station and where he'll likely go from here.
Turn around. I can't.
I'm probably going to get crucified for this, but I have to admit, so far I have not been impressed with this episode. Last time I talked about the problem with the conception of Lockley as being on Clark's side in the war, that it was never really explored. I understand in principle what JMS was doing, but felt this was something that was being too easily glossed over given the enormity of it. While not the same, I also understand in principle what JMS is doing with this episode. The intention is to build slowly towards the point when the episode takes off. The problem is the slow build-up, combined with Lennier's departure, gives this a funereal aspect that together caused this massive drag in the middle. Both Delenn and Sheridan's scenes hand you a hint, yes, but the scenes themselves aren't good enough to justify the time devoted to them. There's no sense that we are building towards something. I can only tell you intellectually that I know we are building towards something. When this episode gets good, it gets really good, don't get me wrong. But the episode is almost a metaphor for Londo himself. The good that wants to show is just being smothered. In the real world, Londo has an attack, and Franklin has to work to stabilize him. When he's finished, he decides to just stay and see if Londo makes it to morning, and is joined by Veer. In the dream world, Veer likewise joins Londo, who's almost weeping that he's going to die. Veer tells Londo the hard truth. The weight of all the sins upon his conscience is such that he's destroying his own heart. It's this part that the episode finally starts to really pick up.
The dream is prophecy. Prophecy is a guess that comes true. When it doesn't, it's a metaphor.
Londo doesn't want to have to face G'Kar, because to face G'Kar is to face the Narn's judgment, and Londo has already judged himself. So while G'Kar watches in the real world, in the dream world, G'Kar symbolizes his guilt for all he has done in the recent years. After confronting Londo, who insists he doesn't want the throne, G'Kar insists he doesn't deserve the throne, and makes him relive the moment when Rifa announced the bombing of the Narn homeworld. But while Londo protests his innocence, G'Kar points out his sin, the sin of silence. After that, it's the chamber where G'Kar was whipped until he screamed, which he had to, or else he would die and his people would remain enslaved forever.
Remember,
Yes.
you were there.
Yes.
And you said nothing.
G'Kar's accusations are not that Londo didn't change the outcome, or even that he didn't try to change the outcome, but rather that he allowed atrocities to pass without comment. Londo finds himself in G'Kar's place on the pillar, and G'Kar in the place of Cartasia.
One word. I want to hear it.
I've said it before, but it bears repeating. Casting Andreas Katsoulis for this role was ingenious. Picking a character actor who typically played villains as your villains only to then have him transform into an ally, spiritual leader, and philosopher was a brilliant move. Over that time, his performance was never, not for one moment, unconvincing. Here, as he takes Cartagia's place, it's once again remarkable. He's not doing an impression or an impersonation. Rather, he's simply adopted the sense of sick self-indulgent sadism with the narcissism to the nth degree that defined Cartagia, yet still made it his own. After Londo has literally participated in self-flagellation, Dream Jakar reveals the degree of this. His attempts to think that he's changed are lies. His expressions of sorrow are only because he's been revealed as a tool of the shadows. But he's too prideful to ever apologize, even if doing so would avoid destroying his own heart. So finally, Londo cries out his apology for what he's done, and upon seeing Jakar in the real world when he awakens, says he's sorry over and over to him. In the coda, after grumbling about the food and the absurdity of expecting him to reduce stress in a time like this, there's a discussion of a spirit that can kill the body that it's in order to move on to a worthier host, and Veer says, "Oh yeah, I know that legend. It's when the spirit is like really angelic, but the body is like a real arsehole. So, make of that what you will, Londo." That just leaves Lanier, who is soon met by the Rangers, but before departing, Delenn arrives for an emotional goodbye. On Earth we have a saying, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. This episode is somewhat important in that it sets Lanier on his journey to join the Rangers, and it shows us into Londo's heart, which is relevant for the events that happen further down the line. Here's the problem with rating this one, though. It's got a fine first act, and a tour de force for the final 2 acts. But the middle plods. It's theoretically needed, but practically just weighs the story down. About 20 minutes of stuff you just have to slog through to get to where the episode takes off. For that reason, I'm giving it Death Star reactor port, although the one thing that holds it back in this case is the valley of boredom in the middle. The directing and cinematography certainly tries. It's a very visually effective work, ambitious in its appearance and living up to its ambition. I just wish the script was stronger for those middle acts to make the journey worthy of both it and the destination.
If you were to impound it and stick it in a hot little room, in a matter of hours, the flavor will bleed away and vanish like the synapses in your brain.